Most people live their financial lives dictated by patterns they didn't consciously choose. These patterns, deeply embedded in the subconscious mind, act like silent programs running the show, attracting experiences that mirror inner beliefs. Florence Scovel Shinn'S, an early 20th century metaphysical teacher, understood this long before neuroscience could prove it. She taught that the mind, especially the subconscious, holds the key to wealth or poverty. The wealthy, knowingly or not, use this understanding as a form of peak mind control to maintain and expand their riches. To understand how the rich stay rich, it's crucial to look beyond mere business strategies or investments. Those are surface-level tactics. The real engine is their mindset, specifically how their subconscious has been programmed to expect wealth, navigate risk with calm, and attract opportunities almost effortlessly. This doesn't mean that all rich people are consciously spiritual or philosophical. It means they operate with a baseline belief that abundance is natural, expected, and deserved. That belief acts like a magnet. Florence said, "The subconscious has no sense of humor, and people often joke themselves into unhappy experiences." This simple idea is revolutionary. What we joke about, complain about, repeat in frustration, all those statements pass directly into the subconscious mind, which accepts them without filtering or logic. If someone constantly says, "I'm broke, I can't afford that," or "money is tight," even playfully, the subconscious translates those words into commands. It then organizes life to match that state. That person will encounter situations where money is indeed scarce, and they will feel that the world is unfair, never realizing they are participating in a self-fulfilling prophecy. In contrast, the wealthy speak differently, even internally. Their inner self-talk, consciously or unconsciously, repeats phrases like, "There's always more money," "Opportunities are everywhere," or "Money flows easily into my life." This language, repeated over time, becomes a dominant mental framework. Even in economic downturns or personal losses, that mental software kicks in and finds new ways to rebuild or even thrive. This is peak mind control, not in the manipulative sense, but in mastering self. The rich know that their outer world reflects their inner conditioning. Another aspect of subconscious wealth programming is expectation. Florence emphasized the spiritual law of expectancy. What you expect, you receive. The subconscious mind thrives on repetition and emotional charge. If you feel strong emotions while thinking about debt, the subconscious gets anchored to that state. If instead you feel excitement and peace while imagining wealth, it locks onto that vision. The subconscious doesn't care if it's real or imagined. It simply records emotional experiences and recreates them. The rich often have emotional associations with success and money that are pleasurable, empowering, and expansive, while many people have negative emotional ties to money, fear, guilt, or shame, which act as repelling forces. This explains why mindset shifts alone can lead to financial breakthroughs. When someone who's struggled financially for years finally shifts how they feel about money, not just what they think, they often experience unexpected windfalls or opportunities. Florence Scovel Shinn'S taught that this isn't magic, but the law. The subconscious, when reprogrammed with new beliefs, becomes a creative servant that rearranges life to suit its new people. But how does one reprogram the subconscious for wealth, especially if they've been conditioned with poverty thinking? Florence offered practical spiritual tools: affirmations, denials, visualization, and faith. She advised using powerful affirmations like, "I now draw from the abundance of the spheres my immediate and endless supply." While this may sound esoteric, it aligns with modern understanding of how affirmations work. They override negative self-talk and implant new suggestions in the subconscious. Over time, the mind accepts these suggestions as true. The rich don't necessarily sit and chant affirmations all day, but they live them. Their environment reflects wealth. Their networks reflect opportunity. Their choices reflect belief in future gains. All of that repetition confirms a worldview of abundance to the subconscious. And just as the poor may unknowingly affirm scarcity through daily choices and speech, the rich reinforce wealth through their lifestyle and expectations. One of Florence's core insights was that the subconscious responds to faith, not force. If someone is trying to get rich from a place of desperation, the subconscious hears lack and fear, not abundance. The goal is to shift the inner climate, not just say the right words, but to feel them as truths. This takes practice. It requires unlearning years of mental habits and societal programming that equate money with struggle. The wealthy often have had early exposure to different mental models, either from family, mentors, or environments where wealth was normalized. This is why changing financial conditions without changing inner beliefs is often temporary. People who suddenly win money or get large inheritances without the corresponding mindset often lose it within a few years. Their subconscious is still calibrated to a lower financial thermostat. The outer world may briefly improve, but the inner world hasn't caught up, so it self-sabotages until it returns to what is familiar. Conversely, many self-made millionaires lose money and gain it back even faster. Why? Because their inner programming has already been rewired to see wealth as inevitable. Loss doesn't scare them. It triggers creativity. This is a high form of subconscious mastery. The rich use loss as information, not as identity. Their belief remains intact, and so they rebuild. Florence Scovel Shinn'S teachings on the subconscious mind, while framed spiritually, have deep psychological truth. The rich stay rich, not because of luck or access alone, but because their inner world supports their outer success. The subconscious is their silent ally, always working behind the scenes to make their dominant beliefs real. And anyone can learn to use that same mind control to change their financial destiny, starting not with effort, but with belief. Florence Scovel Shinn emphasized the immense power of words and how they serve as tools for either creating prosperity or perpetuating limitation. In her teachings, she repeatedly stated that your word is your wand, meaning that what you say, not just aloud but in your inner conversations, shapes your life. When you observe how the rich speak about money, about challenges, and about possibilities, you begin to notice a striking pattern. They speak with intention. Their words are structured around abundance, not scarcity. And whether knowingly or not, they are applying a principle that keeps them rich, because words don't just describe reality, they create it. Most people use language reactively. They speak based on current circumstances, complaining about bills, the cost of living, how hard it is to earn, and how unfair the system is. These statements, repeated daily, become verbal affirmations of lack. Florence warned that this kind of speech passes into the subconscious mind, where it becomes a seed. That seed takes root and eventually manifests as lived experience, confirming the very limitation the person was speaking about. It becomes a feedback loop. Words of lack create experiences of lack, which then validate more words of lack. The wealthy tend to speak proactively. Even when facing financial challenges, their language remains solutions-oriented. You'll rarely hear a truly wealthy individual say things like, "I can't afford that," or "money doesn't grow on trees." Instead, they're more likely to say, "That's not a priority right now," or "Let's find a way to make it happen." These subtle shifts in phrasing reflect a completely different mindset, one that assumes money is available, and it's simply a matter of aligning with it. That belief gets reinforced by the words they use, consciously or not. Florence taught that words carry vibration. Every time we speak, we are broadcasting a frequency into the universe. That frequency is picked up and mirrored back to us in the form of circumstances, people, and events. She wasn't just being poetic. Modern science has begun to catch up, showing how language affects not just others but our own nervous system. Repeating negative or fear-based phrases stimulates stress responses in the body, closing off creative thinking and diminishing problem-solving ability. In contrast, affirming positive, abundant outcomes opens the mind to possibilities and triggers more empowered choices. For the rich, speaking positively about wealth is second nature. They've been trained, whether through upbringing, mentorship, or conscious study, to use language that aligns with success. This doesn't mean they're immune to fear or doubt, but they don't feed it with words. They guard their speech, not from superstition, but from an understanding that language is energetic. Speaking wealth becomes a form of mind control, training the subconscious to expect good things, and thus drawing them in. Florence often used affirmations as tools to realign people's thinking. Statements like, "I have a wonderful work in a wonderful way," "I give wonderful service for wonderful pay," were not just cute phrases. They were energetic declarations designed to rewire the mind for abundance. She understood that many people were programmed with limiting beliefs about money from childhood, that it's dirty, hard to come by, or morally wrong to desire. These beliefs often operate unconsciously, but the antidote is conscious speech, words that uplift, expand, and affirm. The rich often speak in terms of possibilities, not problems. Even when discussing loss, they frame it as a lesson or stepping stone, not a defeat. This framing isn't just motivational, it's neurological. The brain responds to language cues, and when you speak from a place of power, the mind searches for solutions. This leads to inspired action, which in turn creates better results. The wealthy don't just think differently, they speak differently, and that difference compounds over time. It's also worth noting how the rich talk about others' success. While many people might say, they probably cheated, or must be nice, those statements carry bitterness, which keeps wealth energetically distant. In contrast, successful people often say, that's inspiring, or what can I learn from that? That small linguistic shift changes everything. It opens the door to receive rather than resent. Florence taught that envy and criticism block the flow of abundance, while praise and appreciation unlock it. So the way you speak about other people's wealth determines how your own wealth behaves. This principle applies to self-talk as well. The wealthy often have internal dialogues filled with self-belief. When they hit setbacks, they don't spiral into "I'm a failure" or "I'll never recover." Instead, they say things like, "I'll figure this out," or "there's always another opportunity." That inner language becomes the foundation for resilience. Florence said, "Fear is only inverted faith. It is faith in evil instead of good." The words you use either reinforce fear or affirm faith, and the wealthy almost always choose the latter. There's also an emotional component to how words affect wealth. Saying something without feeling it lacks power. But when a statement is charged with emotion, whether fear or joy, it becomes 10 times more potent in the subconscious. The rich don't just say, "I am successful." They feel the success as they speak it. That emotional congruence is what gives their words magnetic force. Florence encouraged people to speak with conviction, even if the outer world seemed contrary. Affirmations are not to be said in a lukewarm way, she wrote. They should be used with deep feeling. Consider how the poor often speak about money in terms of survival, while the rich speak in terms of impact, investment, and creation. This isn't just a matter of vocabulary, it's a reflection of mental positioning. Words shape focus, and focus determines behavior. When you speak as though you're already wealthy, your mind begins to operate from that level. You make decisions differently. You take different risks. You say yes to new ideas instead of retreating in fear. That is how language leads to outcome. Another crucial aspect Florence highlighted was the danger of idle words. Many people say things flippantly, not realizing their long-term impact. "I'm always broke. I'll never get rich." That's outdated. These phrases become affirmations. The rich are careful not to curse their finances with careless talk. Instead, they bless their money, their work, their opportunities. They treat speech as sacred. That mental discipline becomes a habit, and that habit becomes a fortress protecting their prosperity. To adopt this thinking, one doesn't need money first. It begins with watching your words. Catch yourself in the act of speaking lack. Replace "I can't afford it" with "how can I afford it?" Change "I never have enough" to "money is coming to me in expected and unexpected ways." These shifts may seem minor, but over time, they retrain your subconscious to expect wealth. And what the subconscious expects, life delivers. Florence Scovel Shinn'S showed that words are more than sound, they are spiritual commands. The rich, whether through spiritual insight or practical awareness, have learned to command wisely. Their prosperity is not just built on what they do, but on what they say. And anyone willing to change their speech patterns can begin to tap into the same source of abundance, using words as the bridge between current limitations and limitless potential. Florence Scovel Shinn'S believed that fear is a misuse of the imagination, and that faith is the only antidote powerful enough to neutralize it. She taught that in order to create prosperity, a person must develop the ability to control their mind, especially when fear arises. For many people, fear is an automatic response to financial uncertainty. Fear of loss, Fear is not allowed to take root. The rich understand the power of mental control, and they use it strategically to rise above scarcity thinking. They replace fear with faith, not just as a spiritual practice, but as a practical survival mechanism in a competitive world. Fear distorts perception. It magnifies risk and shrinks opportunity. When someone is in a state of fear, their ability to make sound decisions is compromised. Florence called this a form of inverted faith, faith in evil instead of good. She meant that when people dwell in fear, they are putting their belief in negative outcomes. They are rehearsing failure, mentally living in worst-case scenarios, before anything has even happened. That rehearsal sends a message to the subconscious mind. This is what I expect. And as with all beliefs, the subconscious then goes to work manifesting the outer equivalent of that inner expectation. The rich operate differently. When uncertainty arises, they invoke faith, not in a religious sense, but in a calm, internal certainty that everything is working out in their favor. This mindset is not accidental, it is trained. Wealthy individuals are often exposed to environments early in life where risk is normalized, not feared. They learn to view setbacks as data, not doom. They also tend to have mental frameworks that allow them to stay calm during turbulence. Whether it's through affirmations, meditation, positive visualization, or disciplined thinking, they maintain internal control, even when the external world seems unstable. Florence taught that whatever you prepare for mentally, you invite. If you constantly prepare for loss, you eventually experience it. This is why so many people seem stuck in repeating financial patterns. They are habitually anxious about money, worried about bills, obsessing over job security, fearing inflation, and that constant emotional state sends a consistent signal to the subconscious mind: scarcity. Then, when a real financial challenge appears, they respond with panic rather than faith, which only compounds the problem. It becomes a loop of fear, attracting more reasons to fear. The rich interrupt this loop with a different form of mental discipline. They understand that fear is not a trustworthy guide. In fact, they often move forward despite fear, using it as a compass that shows them where growth is possible. Rather than collapsing under pressure, they lean into it. This isn't to say they feel no fear. It's that they don't feed it. They know that feeding fear with mental energy gives it life. Instead, they feed faith. They hold on to a belief that abundance is still possible, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. This ability to hold faith in the face of fear is a powerful mental weapon. Florence described it as mastering the law of substitution, replacing a negative thought with a positive one. The rich apply this constantly. When faced with a potential loss, they focus on potential gains. When a deal falls through, they tell themselves another, better opportunity is on the way. This isn't just positive thinking, it's psychological resilience. It gives them the emotional bandwidth to stay creative and strategic when others freeze in fear. Faith also gives access to intuition. Florence often spoke of the power of divine guidance, the idea that when the mind is calm and clear, inspired ideas will flow. Fear blocks that channel and creates mental static that drowns out intuitive insights. The rich often credit gut instinct for their success, but that instinct only works because they've trained their minds to remain receptive rather than reactive. When you're consumed by fear, you miss subtle cues, you overlook synchronicities, you second-guess your best idea. But when faith is present, the mind becomes a magnet for the right people, the right timing, and the right solution. Another aspect of faith over fear is the belief that everything happens for a reason. The wealthy often operate with an underlying assumption that even losses have value. They may say things like, "That deal falling through saved us," or "That failure taught us what we needed." This interpretation protects their energy. It keeps them from spiraling. Florence emphasized the importance of reframing setbacks, not as punishments but as redirections. In doing so, one maintains alignment with the flow of good. The rich understand that the meaning they assign to events determines how they respond, and how they respond shapes what comes next. Fear often causes people to shrink. They play small, they avoid investing, avoid taking chances, avoid asking for what they deserve. Over time, this builds a life of safety, but also of limitation. The rich, by Faith activates the law of attraction. It sends a clear, focused signal to the subconscious mind and to the world, saying, I am ready for abundance. The rich have, consciously or unconsciously, embedded this belief so deeply that it becomes automatic. When faced with financial adversity, they don't collapse into survival mode. They activate faith. They repeat affirmations, visualize success, remind themselves of past victories, or surround themselves with voices that reinforce possibility. It's also worth noting that fear is contagious. One person's anxiety can influence an entire team or family. The rich are often mindful of the environments they participate in. They avoid excessive exposure to fear-driven news, pessimistic people, or toxic financial narratives. This is not ignorance, it is protection. They guard their mindset like an asset because they know it directly affects their outcomes. Florence would say, never run after a fear thought, always meet it squarely, and quickly substitute a statement of truth. The rich live by this in many forms, constantly swapping fear for faith before it has a chance to settle in. In times of economic turmoil or personal financial crisis, the separation between rich and poor often becomes more mental than material. Two people can face the same external event, job loss, market crash, inflation, and have completely different outcomes based on how they process it internally. One succumbs to fear and freezes. The other activates faith and finds a way through. That difference, compounded over time, is what builds lasting wealth. Florence's message remains timeless. Mental control is the foundation of abundance. If you cannot manage your thoughts in the face of fear, your wealth will always be fragile. But if you can cultivate faith, unshakable belief in your ability to create, to attract, to rise again, then you have the most valuable asset of all. The rich stay rich not just because they have money, but because they have mastered the mental game. They have learned to see fear not as a barrier, but as a signal to turn inward, activate faith, and speak only what they want to see. That is peak mind control, and that is how wealth sustains itself. Florence Scovel Shinn'S taught that resistance blocks the flow of good. She described the law of non-resistance as a spiritual principle that allows abundance to flow freely when we stop fighting against circumstances, people, or outcomes. In the context of wealth, this law becomes especially powerful. Most people, when dealing with financial stress or unmet desires, tense up. They obsess over the problem, worry constantly, and try to force solutions. But the wealthy, whether by instinct or training, have learned to release that grip. They know when to act decisively, and they also know when to step back and allow. This balance between focused action and surrender is what Florence called non-resistance. It is not passivity, it is wisdom. When someone resists a condition, whether it's debt, a bad investment, or an uncertain future, they are in a mental state of pushing against reality. That pushing creates tension in the body and static in the mind. Resistance says, this shouldn't be happening, which often leads to reactive decisions fueled by fear or frustration. Florence warned that resistance keeps you locked in the very pattern you are trying to escape. By obsessing over a negative situation, you tie your energy to it and end up repeating it. The more you fight against lack, the more lack you seem to encounter. Wealthy individuals understand this in practice. They rarely waste energy resisting what is. If a deal collapses, they pivot. If the market changes, they adapt. They don't indulge in emotional outbursts or spiral into despair. That doesn't mean they are immune to disappointment, but they don't let resistance linger. They are masters at quickly returning to a neutral or even empowered state. This emotional fluidity allows them to stay open to new options. In contrast, someone stuck in resistance becomes mentally rigid, unable to see the opportunities right in front of them. Florence illustrated this principle with the example of people chasing after money in desperation, pushing and struggling, only to find that it eludes them even more. The vibration of struggle repels wealth. The universe responds not to your need, but to your state. Non-resistance is a state of inner peace, acceptance, and trust. It says, even though I don't see the solution right now, I know it's on the way. The rich often carry this attitude, consciously or not. That relaxed confidence keeps their channels open for unexpected sources of income, inspired ideas, and timely support. Non-resistance also applies to how the wealthy relate to others. Instead of blaming competitors, clients, or resistance ties them to that negative energy. The moment they release the resentment, either the person changes or is removed from their experience. The rich are quick to let go of personal friction because they understand that holding on to resentment drains their creative power and focus. This principle doesn't mean accepting mediocrity or injustice. Rather, it's about aligning your mental and emotional energy with the result you desire, not the condition you dislike. For example, someone struggling with debt, who focuses daily on how unfair or overwhelming it is, will stay locked in that reality. But someone who acknowledges the debt, creates a plan, and then mentally focuses on freedom and wealth is practicing non-resistance. They are not denying the challenge, but they are not feeding it either. The rich do this naturally. When they incur losses, they process it quickly, make a decision, and then move forward without emotional baggage. Florence also spoke of non-resistance in relation to timing. Many people get frustrated when results don't come quickly. They begin to doubt, second guess, and eventually sabotage the very thing they were trying to manifest. The rich have a greater tolerance for delayed gratification. They understand that good things often take time to mature. Their ability to wait with calm expectation, rather than anxious urgency, is a form of non-resistance. They plant seeds and trust the process. This mindset allows wealth to grow without constant interruption. There is also a connection between non-resistance and flow. In a resistant state, everything feels hard: conversations, decisions, movement. In a non-resistant state, synchronicities occur. Things line up. Phone calls come at the right time. Opportunities appear. This isn't luck, it's energetic alignment. The rich often live in this flow state more often than not because they are not mentally fighting life. They have learned to trust their timing, their instincts, and the unfolding path. Florence would describe this as getting out of your own way. When you stop trying to control every detail, you make space for grace to enter. One of the biggest barriers to non-resistance is attachment. Many people attach so strongly to a specific outcome that they become blind to better options. Florence advised keeping desires clear, but not rigid. Say what you want, visualize it, and then release it. Say, I want this or something better. The wealthy frequently operate with this mindset. They pursue goals, but they don't collapse if one path doesn't work out. They adapt quickly because their identity isn't tied to one outcome. This flexibility is a hallmark of non-resistance. Even in negotiation or business dealings, non-resistance plays a role. The rich don't enter deals from desperation. If terms don't work, they walk away calmly. This calm detachment often strengthens their position. People sense when someone is grounded and not needy. Florence emphasized that non-resistance brings power, not through force, but through presence. When you stop grasping and pushing, you exude a kind of confidence that naturally attracts favorable conditions. Another area where this shows up is with the fear of losing money. Many people hoard, cling, or make decisions from a place of trying to protect what they have. That's resistance. It sends a message of lack to the subconscious. There's not enough, and I have to hold tightly to what I've got. The wealthy tend to circulate money. They invest, donate, support causes, and take educated risks. This isn't recklessness, it's flow. They treat money as a current that must move, not a possession to clutch. That mentality reinforces abundance. Florence said, man must prepare for the thing he has asked for, even though there is no sign yet in sight. That preparation requires faith, and faith is impossible in a state of resistance. Non-resistance also allows for inner healing, which directly impacts wealth. Many people's financial struggles stem not from a lack of opportunity, but from unresolved emotional patterns, shame, guilt, unworthiness. When they resist facing those emotions, they stay stuck. The rich, especially those on conscious paths, do the inner work. They release limiting beliefs, forgive past mistakes, and open themselves to receive. Florence taught that prosperity is a spiritual condition, not just a material one. Releasing inner resistance clears the path for outer wealth to appear. Ultimately, non-resistance is not about giving up on desires. It's about releasing the mental and emotional tension that blocks them. The rich have learned that by letting go, they gain more. They trust that what is theirs cannot be taken, and what leaves must eventually manifest in the physical world. For her, imagination wasn't a childlike pastime or creative hobby. It was a spiritual faculty, a direct line to the unseen forces that mold experience. In the world of wealth, this concept holds profound power. The rich do not only work with money, they work with vision. They imagine their lives into existence long before those lives become visible to others. This use of imagination is one of the key mental disciplines that keeps the rich rich. Imagination is the workshop of the mind. Florence would say that the images you hold in consciousness act as blueprints, and the subconscious mind, in partnership with the universe, sets out to build them. Most people unconsciously imagine problems, worst-case scenarios, and fear-based outcomes. They replay scenes of rejection, loss, or limitation. These mental rehearsals, repeated often enough, become instructions. The subconscious cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. If someone continually imagines themselves struggling, they're programming their subconscious to seek and attract conditions that match that mental movie. The wealthy understand this principle and use it deliberately. They don't wait for circumstances to change before feeling successful. They imagine success in great detail, with emotion and with certainty. Even when they have no physical evidence, they see themselves as abundant. They visualize outcomes they want and hold on to those images with consistency. This creates an internal frequency that draws in the resources, people, and opportunities needed to make those images real. Florence described this as casting the picture, projecting your desire so clearly that it sets the creative law in motion. This ability to imagine clearly and powerfully is not limited to artists or dreamers. It's a mental muscle that anyone can train. The rich often start training this muscle early in life. Some may have grown up with parents who encouraged them to think big, believe in possibility, or envision success. Others develop the habit through reading, mentorship, or personal experience. Regardless of how they acquire it, the result is the same. They habitually imagine themselves winning. This habit becomes a form of psychological conditioning. It creates a baseline expectation of success that shapes their decisions, their confidence, and ultimately, their result. Florence was clear that vague desires lead to vague results. She encouraged people to use precision in their imagining, to get clear on what they wanted, feel it as already done, and hold to that image even when external conditions looked opposite. This mental discipline is critical. Many people imagine something briefly, then let doubt or fear erase the picture. The wealthy persist. They rehearse the desired outcome over and over, building emotional attachment to it. This not only strengthens belief, it keeps the mind anchored in abundance rather than in fear. Imagination also serves as a tool for creative problem solving. The rich use it to innovate, to see solutions others miss, to envision new business models or investment strategies. When a problem arises, they don't just react. They imagine a way through. They ask, what does the best case scenario look like? And then begin to move toward it. Florence called this living in the end, the act of mentally inhabiting your desired outcome, even when the road there is uncertain. It's not about ignoring reality, it's about building a new one from the inside. One of the most powerful aspects of imagination is how it changes identity. When you consistently imagine yourself as wealthy, generous, competent, and free, you begin to identify with those qualities. Your behavior shifts. You begin making decisions aligned with that self-image. You may speak more confidently, take bolder actions, or surround yourself with people who match the frequency of your life. This creates a feedback loop. As your self-image improves, your actions improve, which then creates results that reinforce the self-image. The rich often operate from this loop without even realizing it. Their imagination shapes their identity, and their identity produces their wealth. Florence emphasized the importance of combining imagination with faith. Simply imagining without belief doesn't create results. You must not only see the vision, but feel it as real, trust it will unfold, and act in alignment with it. She gave countless examples of people who imagined success, affirmed it, trusted it, and then received exactly what they pictured. The imagination sets the destination, but faith is the fuel that keeps you moving toward it. The rich carry this faith, even when outcomes are delayed. They don't abandon the vision because of temporary setbacks. They hold fast Visualization is one of the most practical applications of this principle. Many wealthy people use vision boards, daily mental rehearsals, or even guided meditations to embed images of success into their consciousness. They imagine not only the money, but the lifestyle, the impact, the emotional state they want. They walk through their ideal day in their minds, feel the satisfaction of completed goals, and picture themselves already living the outcome. This practice isn't just motivational, it's magnetic. The more clearly and consistently they hold the vision, the faster reality begins to shape itself around it. Florence warned against using imagination destructively. Just as you can build wealth with the mind, you can destroy it. Imagining failure, obsessing over what could go wrong, or replaying painful memories all act as negative creative forces. They implant fear into the subconscious and trigger behaviors that create more loss. The rich tend to minimize this kind of mental rehearsal. They discipline their minds to return to the desired image quickly. They don't indulge in long fantasies of failure or revenge or lack. Instead, they redirect. They know their imagination is a creative tool, and they use it responsibly. There is also a connection between imagination and receiving. Florence taught that you must first imagine receiving your good before it can appear. This is where many people struggle. They say they want more money, but when they imagine having it, they feel fear, guilt, or disbelief. That emotional mismatch blocks the manifestation. The wealthy, in contrast, imagine receiving money with ease. They picture themselves holding it, spending it, enjoying it. That emotional congruence allows wealth to flow in because the subconscious sees no conflict between the vision and reality. Imagination, when used skillfully, also unlocks joy. The rich don't just imagine money, they imagine freedom, travel, purpose, legacy. Their visions are emotionally rich, layered, and inspiring. That emotional charge adds power to the vision. Florence taught that joy is a magnet. When you imagine something and it fills you with joy, you have tapped into a true desire, not just a superficial want. The more joy you feel in imagining it, the more quickly it manifests. The wealthy stay connected to this joy, using it as both a guide and a fuel source. Ultimately, what separates the rich from those who struggle financially is not just knowledge or opportunity, it's vision. The rich see possibilities others don't. They imagine success before anyone else believes it's possible. They rehearse the life they want until it becomes second nature. They understand that the outer world is merely a mirror, and to change the mirror, you must change the image in your mind. Florence Scovel Shinn taught this truth nearly a century ago, and it remains just as powerful today. The imagination, when used with faith and discipline, becomes the foundation for every form of wealth.